As we've done in our other year-end issues, I want to end with three things that I think you ought to be looking for in 2018. The first is what I'll call Innovation 2.0. For the last few years, there's been a lot of debate about how much innovation is there going to be? How much is the model is going to change? Is it the death of big law or is it just business as usual? I think we're moving beyond that point. I think we're moving to a point in which there's widespread consensus that there are important changes going on and that all lawyers, from the largest law firms to solo practitioners, are going to have to change in order to adapt their practices to a changing marketplace and a changing world. Not so radically that it'll be unrecognizable, at least not in the short to medium term, but change is coming. The real question is now how to actualize that change, how to implement that change. And we think one of the most interesting things that's going to happen is that organizations are going to increasingly give responsibility for taking the idea of change and making it real to a dedicated group of new professionals. This is an old idea in some ways. We saw that when marketing came into the world of law. We saw that when human resources or recruiting came into the world of law. We had dedicated professionals inside institutions. Now we're increasingly seeing organizations have chief innovation officers or legal operations specialists. Not surprisingly, it's starting in the largest organizations, big law firms, big companies, but we've seen it even within the federal government, in which at the Department of Justice, there's a lawyer whose sole role is thinking about how to bring innovation and change to the DOJ. This is a very important trend because we know from other research in other areas that when you have dedicated professionals, they then have an incentive to accelerate the pace of change. And so watch for this institutional elaboration in the coming years. We're doing a major study on this at the Center of the Legal Profession, and we'll hopefully be able to report the results of that to you in the coming year. The second major trend is one that we've been talking about now for some time, but in my view is continuing to accelerate, and that's globalization of the market for legal services. In fact, as I record this video, we are preparing to go to India and launch the India edition of our new book, The Indian Legal Profession in the Age of Globalization, the Rise of the Corporate Legal Sector and its Impact on Lawyers and Society. That is going to be, actually was just recently published here in the United States and the UK, and also has now been published in India. The response to the book, both in India and in the United States and the UK, has been tremendous. At our events in India, we have literally 500 or 600 leading professionals, lawyers, judges, government officials coming to discuss the findings of the book. And that's because the legal profession in India plays a critical role in India's development and India's role on the world stage. And as we record this video, the Indian Prime Minister is holding an innovation summit in which representatives from the US government are attending because India has become one of the most innovative and important places in the world. We have another book coming out on Brazil, another book coming out on China, and our research focus in 2018, and the focus, I think, of everyone who wants to think about where the world is going to be on Africa. Africa is going to be one of the most important regions in the world in the coming years. It's beginning already. It's going to accelerate in 2018. And those people who invest in understanding Africa with all of its complexity are going to be ahead of the curve, just as those people who invested in Asia 2 decades ago are reaping the benefits of today. Both of these changes the changes in innovation and the tremendous amount of new technologies and big data and process management and the institutionalization of innovation on the one hand, and changes in the globalization of the market for legal services and the increasing importance of emerging economies in Asia, Latin America, and now Africa are all pushing changes in legal education. Of all the institutions in the legal ecosystem, the one that's changed the least is legal education. But that's changing as well. And in 2018, we think you're going to see those changes accelerate. We already have seen an explosion in the growth of online legal education. We've seen the proliferation of new kinds of courses. Some law schools are teaching coding. Other law schools, like my own, have people like Ron Dolan, a former early engineer at Google who went back to law school, who's teaching a course called Law 2.0, bringing in some of the most innovative people in the technology world. We have joint courses that are being taught with engineers and lawyers. And we see a tremendous growth in the number of international and foreign students seeking legal education in the United States, and conversely, American students studying abroad. This isn't just about LLM programs anymore. It's about people getting full 3-year JDs here in the United States. It's about innovative and collaborative partnerships that allow people to study abroad as part of their legal education. And we see more and more students who want to work in a globalized environment and who want to become what I call globally fluent. I think that's going to be a tremendous change in legal education. And law schools are going to have to connect more to what's happening in the profession as a whole. We see new kinds of positions being adopted by many law schools. Professors of practice, for example, who are hired particularly because of their expertise in the real world. But it's just the beginning. And if we're going to train the lawyers for the 21st century, we need to start in 2018. And I think you're going to see law schools trying to separate and distinguish themselves by how much they are trying to connect to the real trends in the real world. That's the only way in which people are going to come to law school, but it's also the way in which law schools are going to reach out to populations of people who are not going to get JDs, but are going to be trained to do other kinds of jobs in the legal ecosystem that don't require full 3-year JDs. And as deregulation continues and experimentation continues, we're going to see legal education broadening beyond simply training lawyers for traditional legal jobs.